If I went back just 7 years and uttered the words Ferrari and SUV in the same sentence, I'd probably have been shouted out of whatever room I was in for heresy. Don't believe me? Believe Flavio Manzoni, the senior VP of design at Ferrari, who back in 2015 had this to say when asked whether Ferrari would be joining the trend of building an ultra-luxury SUV. Ferrari doesn't want to make anything that follows a trend. We are not followers. I don't think an SUV can be a supercar. Every time we work on a new Ferrari, we try to improve every aspect, including the centre of gravity, so an SUV is not a Ferrari. I don't understand why so many other brands are doing them. In my opinion, it shows a lack of courage, it's not within our DNA, and it's not something we're ever going to look at. It wouldn't be a Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari would turn in his grave. So, Mr. Manzoni, what changed? Is the Purosangue not a Ferrari? How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to what is certainly not an affront on Flavio Manzoni, because what he's achieved with Ferrari is exceptional. It's just always interesting to consider how attitudes and directions change over time depending on circumstances. And as that question alluded to, there has been a change to the circumstances for manufacturers of luxury exotic sports cars like Ferrari, Lamborghini and the likes, which is that now more than ever, it's a good time to make an SUV. In the past, many of these manufacturers would never have dreamt of doing something like this, so why now? Well, in this video I'm going to talk about why we're seeing these traditional sports car manufacturers building these SUVs out of seemingly nowhere, and why Porsche has such a huge part to play in it. If you like this kind of content and want to see more like it, remember to hit the like button. Let's try and hit 1,000 likes on this video. Subscribe as well if you're new, and let me know in the comments down below what your opinions are on SUVs and whether you think it's a good idea for these brands to jump on the SUV bandwagon. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So first off, who's actually building or planning to build an ultra-luxury sports SUV in this space? I've mentioned the Ferrari Purosangue and we know about the Lamborghini Urus, of course, and of course before that you had the military and utility inspired LM002, which appeared in the late 80s. There's obviously the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, which is at least a bit more in line with the brand's longer term goals, and to an extent the Bentley Bentayga, which sits in a similar area and is still probably fairly in line with the brand. Then we have Lotus with their Elettra, which is a huge shift from their existing setup of cars, maybe even more so than Ferrari, and maybe I could even throw Maserati in there with the Levante and Alfa Romeo with the Stelvio Quadrifoglio. These have all cropped up during the mid to late 2010s and early 2020s with differing levels of success. I am of course missing Porsche from this list, but we'll get to that soon. So why are all these brands making SUVs all of a sudden? Well, again, as that question to Manzoni mentioned, it's a major trend at the moment in the car world. Back in Jan 2020, I made a video titled 8 Reasons Why Cars Are Getting Bigger, and in that I outlined a bunch of the reasons, but with cars getting bigger and with more people wanting bigger cars, the biggest cars are going to win out in terms of sales. That's why in 2021, 45% of all cars sold, around 35 million, were SUVs, which was a new record in terms of market share and actual number of sales, showing just how popular they are and of course how many are being built. And when there's a lot of demand for a certain type of car, manufacturers aren't just going to make that type of car to fit that demand, they're also going to capitalize on the hype with higher prices, which is why not only are many SUVs pretty pricey, they also offer manufacturers the highest profit margins at the moment. Take Ford for example. It was reported that they make around $10,000 in profit from large SUVs or pickup trucks, while they break even or sometimes even lose money on normal cars. When you take into account the fact the Ford F-Series is their best selling car, it's effectively what keeps the business going. Now all this makes sense for your average everyday manufacturer, but what about the ones that traditionally make luxury sports cars or supercars and the likes? In all walks of life we have specialists in certain fields. Surely these brands have value in and of themselves and in the types of cars they make. I mean, Ferrari was literally the most profitable car brand in 2021 despite not selling any SUVs, so there clearly has to be specialist value. Well, apparently they see it slightly differently, and let's be real, even when you are the most profitable brand on the planet, you still want more, and when you see success elsewhere, you want to be a part of it. Or if you're worried about the long-term viability of your very niche sports cars, you might also consider going down the SUV route to capitalize on the trend, like Lotus for example, who can then reinvest that money into the very niche race cars for the road that they like to make. Lamborghini have already done this to great effect, with the Urus helping the brand set a new sales record in 2021, with just over 5,000 of them sold in total, almost double the Huracan and more than 5 times as many Aventadors in the same year. And while these manufacturers all start to make their way into the SUV SUV market, they are doing so in the wake of a brand that has benefited massively from their own intelligence and early adoption bonus, Porsche. Now sit back, because I think this is a pretty cool story. Porsche was struggling back in the early 90s. It was not a good time for them at all. In 1986 they had sold around 50,000 cars, and in 1991 they sold just 23,000, dipping all the way down to 14,000 by 1993. The US was Porsche's largest market, and they sold just 3,000 units of the 911 in that year. Clearly they were in some real trouble. They were in $128 million of debt, and their cars weren't selling. It was potentially the end of days for the brand, and they knew they had to do something about it. It's true that the sports car market was suffering at the time, but Porsche still saw that the newly released Mazda MX-5 or Miata sold 21,000 units in the US, while the 911 was sitting at 3,000, so they took inspiration and built the Boxster, their cheaper entry into the sports car market, which captured a whole new demographic for them, people that would always have aspired to own a Porsche but never quite had the money for it. Even though some Porsche purists turned their noses up at it, without the Boxster it's highly likely the brand would have died out, so the purists would have had nothing to turn their noses up at anymore anyway. This was like a light bulb moment for Porsche, which seems crazy, doesn't it? Who knew that if you made cars that were attractive to different people, you would get different people buying your cars? So with this mindset to seek out new opportunities and new markets, Porsche tried to consider what people would want in the new millennium. What would the new car trends look like? As I mentioned, the US was important for Porsche as it was their biggest market, so when they saw the incredible success of the Ford Explorer, which was paving the way for SUV ownership in the US, Porsche began to consider what they could do. With some market research, the company realised that 2/3 of Porsche owners at the time owned at least 2 other cars, and one was usually an SUV of some description. So their own clients were buying cars from other manufacturers to satisfy their other requirements. Porsche therefore designed and built the Cayenne in the late 1990s and released it for sale for the 2003 model year, with the hope that some of the existing Porsche owners would buy it to replace their other SUVs, and that it would open up the brand to a new market, capitalising on their existing brand value as a luxury sports car manufacturer that people desired. And of course it did. It helped the brand to reach a $2.1 billion cash flow and did absolute numbers in terms of sales, and by the 2007-2008 fiscal year it outsold the 911 by almost 50,000 units. As the SUV market has evolved to include compact SUVs, so Porsche has evolved their offering to include the Macan, which has also been well received. It's so interesting that in some of the toughest times Porsche were able to strike gold with their SUV offering, and have effectively shown other manufacturers that it is possible for a sports car only manufacturer to succeed with an SUV while still making something that at least somewhat representative of the brand. Now of course there will be people like me who have zero interest in owning a Cayenne or a Macan, but that doesn't mean I don't want a 911, a Cayman or a Boxster, as those cars remain interesting to me. It's just now Porsche can rest more easily with a broader offering that hedges against any type of car suddenly being less sought after. So simply put, if SUVs suddenly dipped in interest, they've got the sports cars to keep them going, and vice versa. It would of course suck if Porsche got rid of the sports cars altogether that define the brand, but I can't hate them for adding more tricks into their arsenal. So going back to the point of this video, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Lotus, Alfa, Maserati, Rolls-Royce, Bentley and the likes have all seen the successes of what Porsche has done, and been put under increasing pressure with the trend towards bigger cars and SUVs more specifically, and basically gone about it in their own ways. Of course, we as the consumers can opine on how this makes us feel in relation to the brands, but I think it's a good policy to keep an open mind on this kind of stuff. I have no interest in buying a Lotus Electra. In fact, I don't like how it looks or how different it is to Colin Chapman's simplify then add lightness philosophy, but that doesn't mean I don't still desperately want an Exige Cup 430, and if the Electra does absolute bits for Lotus and means they can make more cool cars like the Exige in the future, then I am happy. It's important to remember though that having to change your brand overnight can be very tough and quite difficult to implement. You have to be in a really strong place to do this. I mean, look at McLaren with the GT, a step away from supercars and sports cars to a Grand Tourer, and it really didn't do well in terms of sales because it's not what consumers expect from the brand. So you really need to know your audience and do something that you expect them to like. For example, it might be a bit weird if I started making videos about jet planes. I'm sure some of you might be interested, but I'm not sure it would be the highest performing content on my channel, and it would take time to grow a community that cared about that kind of stuff, which Porsche certainly have on their side. Anyway, now I'm rambling again, but with that in mind, I honestly reckon the Ferrari Purosangue will be a success, as the Ferrari value is in the brand itself in many ways, and I'm sure that many Ferrari owners and fans will buy the SUV for the family. I'm less certain about the Lotus, they don't have the same brand value Ferrari has, but only time will tell. But that's just my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd really love to hear them, and make sure you hit the like button. As I said, it's to try and hit 1,000 likes in this video. It's free and really helps me out. Also, hit subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it. I post twice a week, so there's plenty more for you guys to enjoy. Massive thanks to the patrons always for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Listen.